The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and FreedomSlips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, FreedomSlips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome to the Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. It's a lovely Sunday evening. Hopefully we have our guest on, Laura Eisenhower. Hi, Laura, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hi. I'm just going to bring Sarah on. Just give me one moment.
Okay.
How are you doing tonight, Laura?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Hello.
I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. Oh, hi, Sarah.
Hi.
Hi, Sarah. We're live on air now with Laura. How are you doing?
Oh, hello. I'm doing well.
Hi there.
Hi.
Nice to be back. Thanks for having me back, you guys.
That's okay, Laura.
Oh, it's awesome.
It's nice to have you back. Before I continue with this show, I just want to make a little announcement. Next week will be our last show. The last Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. We're basically me and Sarah taking a break for a couple of months, but we will be back, but on another station. So for our listeners out there who tune in every week, we will be away for a couple of months working on other projects, but we'll be back in the new year. So I just wanted to say that before we start the show. So Laura, what can we talk about today? I mean, is there anything specific you want to just talk about before I jump into the questions? Anything you've been up to recently that you'd like everyone to know about?
Gosh, not a whole lot. I've definitely been getting a lot more downtime than I've really ever had. I did go to Montserrat, Spain, which was amazing. That was a little while ago, maybe a couple weeks, 3 weeks, almost a month ago. And it was just really awesome. But otherwise, I've just been working on my book, really, and really grateful to have the time to be able to do that. And as far as what we can talk about, my goodness, you guys can take me anywhere you want to go.
What's your book going to be? What's your book going to be about?
Excuse me. Well, it's about the quest of the planetary consciousness of Venus on all these different sort of octave levels that relate to how that energy is assisting the Earth right now and moving to the next level, and how that sort of relates to things astrological, well, because of the Venus transits, but also mythology, and also, our chakra system and our DNA and how it relates to the Earth and how we're all connected. And sort of, I weave in my own personal story to sort of back up, how I came to these conclusions or how I understand it. And then I sort of have like the blueprint or the sort of more factual to sort of back it up, just to give it more definition. Helping people to understand it's a universal blueprint, and it's really to activate humanity or people. And yeah, and so it's sort of that quest on a heart level to be in that higher frequency of, just out of this muck we've been in.
Yeah, I can understand that. Do you want to talk a little about your work? I mean, what type of work do you do? I mean, do you actually work like one-to-one with people? I know you do like sessions. I've been on your website a few times. What type of like work, like what kind of problems do people like come to you with, which they need help with, I guess is what I'm trying to ask.
Right. Well, what is like,
yeah. Like what kind of problems are people coming to you with? Like, I mean, I guess a lot of people are like waking up to a lot of stuff that's going on in the world and wondering, what the hell, do I do, and, what is my part in all of this? How can I, help, or how can I, deal with a lot of the stuff that's going on?
Yep, that's pretty much I would say that's almost like the umbrella, but with very unique and different stories. Experiencing what we're experiencing in the outer world, plus the inner processing that is accelerated by things outside of us. And it can take us in all different types of directions, depending on, what we choose to align with and what we're kind of holding on to. But yeah, so I get a lot of people who are contactees. I get people, who are trying to just navigate things like relationship and career. People who really want to know themselves on the larger picture level. Purpose, sort of, galactic history. I delve into past lives and stuff. But I really like astrology and tarot tool to sort of ground some of it because, humans have filters, and I don't believe anybody can give a full-on accurate reading, and I'd rather a person be able to relate into the tools a little bit more than what I'm seeing. and I try and be very careful about how I do it, and so really just to serve that vessel and being able to advance itself, and everything else I like to keep a mystery or not dive into it too much, because I've had people do that to me and it's really gotten in my way, and didn't really assist me at all. But I'm working with a galactic deck right now. I've sort of been doing less readings, but people with different traumas, people who are trying to understand my lab experiences, and it tells me stories that help me with my work, because it's like, okay, these are real people here. It helps me to really, over the years, it's helped me to get a grasp of what's going on without getting lost in the internet explanations, which are completely contradictory. So
yeah, I've noticed that as well. There's so many contradictions around. I mean, you watch YouTube videos and things like that. One YouTube video tells you one thing, and another one tells you the exact opposite. It's a bit difficult to work your way through all the disinformation. How do you work your way through things like disinformation? Do you go with your instincts, or how do you sift through all the rubbish and work out what's real and what isn't?
Well, I can't immerse myself in it too much without just trying to anchor into what my inner voice is trying to tell me. And then I just sort of put the two together, and I sort of let it do kind of like the editing, what doesn't really belong, and what is something I need to take with me to integrate into maybe something else I sort of understand. And I just choose to stick with an independent approach and not attach myself to anything, unless it's so resonant with what my experience is and what I know to be true that I can feel it, in the frequency of my body and how it responds, or just, just the energetic response to it. If it's feeling opening and grounding versus constricting and like some alarms going off and saying, wait, like the bullshit bull stuff meter, that we've all working with to have discernment. I just really make sure that's polished, and I'm not losing myself to it. And I give everything the benefit of the doubt. I believe everything exists, but I'm only going to really speak for what I sense to be true and what I feel absolutely gives it definition or understands it in a similar way. Everything else I have respect for, and I see that it has a place, but I wouldn't be able to really speak that much on it except for what I've experienced with clients. But then ultimately we realize that we're all a part of this and we're all experiencing it. We just can't spread ourselves too thin while we're, in this sort of lower density, but soon it'll all make sense, and we won't be in such opposition, I think, as a human race, because the ultimate struggle is really how we heal from our wounds and how we appease our soul, and all these attacks in between are just the symptoms of that theft that we've experienced, and that disconnect.
Yeah, I agree. There seems to be a lot of what I call fear porn going around. I mean, how do you deal with that? Do you just completely avoid it? Or do you watch mainstream news or stories, about what's going on in the world with wars and stuff like that? Do you just
what's that?
Do you just recommend people avoid that, or is there a good way of dealing with it?
Well, I think people just have to allow their process to be their process. I don't think that's going to be something that really sticks after a while, because it's just when you are ready to move to the next level, you'll notice that there's not really a connection anymore, and you can begin to see through it. And I believe everybody's really unfolding into something greater, and the obvious things that need to go will be obvious unless you really are just not in touch at all with yourself or nature. And it's, but the way I deal with it is, I know it's a part of the alchemy. I know that it's not the end all be all, but it's a part of the breakdown process, and the rebirth process. And it's, and then all the things where we didn't feel we had control and we were assaulted and traumatized, trying to mend that all at the same time. But as we come together in unity, all that's being healed. And so all the fear stuff, to me, is just kind of like showing the infection, the off chance that all this can turn into like a huge infection versus its natural ability to know how to heal itself and move to the next level. So in every moment we're making a choice if we're going to be weakened by it and we fall for the false solutions that override our ability to advance ourselves to experience it more authentically. We can choose like ourselves. And when that fear stuff comes in, you can allow it to push you into the solution and the antidote versus saying, okay, I've lost my power to this story. I'm going to be looking to the presidents and the system to create disclosure and for all this change to happen to feel any level of security. And then you're still losing yourself to it. So I just want to be a witness to it. I don't want to have a connection to it. So I'm already divorced from it, but I'm witnessing it, recognizing that I have my own inner catastrophes enough. Like, so the outer world, it doesn't surprise me. But what do I do with my inner catastrophes? You just keep having to follow the spark of regeneration and rebirth and that spirit connection, which is a higher frequency, which can defy what the physical laws are.
Yeah, I do tend to avoid a lot of the fear porn myself. It's difficult when you go on like Facebook and it appears on your timeline, and you'd have to deal with it, I guess, in that case. But a lot of people I see who say they're awake seem to post nothing but fear stuff. I don't know why that is.
I see that. I feel so over it. I don't want to engage in it. I don't care to figure it out. I wrote about that the other day. So I channel my ADD into this direction. Like if I see that stuff, I naturally sort of space out, and it just doesn't plug in anywhere anymore. It's just sort of like, yeah, whatever. That's bound to be happening in a lot of ways. And there is a bit of an energetic showdown. But it's already pretty obvious that, and with the latest things that have been coming in and, different writings that people have shared that I feel connected to, we're on track, and nothing can really stop it now. And this is the final year of the stellar activation cycle, 2017. So it is all happening by the end of the year. And so the purge is going to be really powerful for people. That's going to be the hard part. It's going to be confusing to be in the chaos of purging versus trying to stay grounded with something with all the other stuff around. Anyway, sorry, go ahead.
So what do you see happening like in the next year as far as, some kind of transition happening? Or, I've obviously the fear porn stuff is saying World War III and financial collapse and all this kind of stuff, which you hear pretty much every year, don't you really? But what do you sort of see happening like in the next year as far as people waking up and, all that type of thing?
Well, I think it's based on what a person decides to attach themselves to, and what you attach yourself to. The further invested you are in it, the more likely that's going to be a timeline that you're going to play out or experience. Along the way, if you are able to perceive, something better and higher for yourself, you'll see that doorway, or, you might have to wait another bunch of cycles, which might be frustrating, but something really needs to get ingrained. But the thing is, I don't think anything's impossible. I don't believe in enslavement that you can't reverse, no matter what the situation is, But some people have to experience that in order to just break through eventually. And that's why we see that going on with timeline manipulation and time travel and, future selves and past selves and just everything, trying to restore itself in this sort of, oh, well, we didn't think of it sooner sort of way, but inevitably we're going to be facing those issues. But set and everything that it's feeding on doesn't want to, the things in control of it don't want to progress past that. They just want to keep that there. And so during this time I feel we're in, people have a doorway out, or they might say, it's easier for me to be in a relationship with this and see where it takes me, even if it's not to the greatest place. And I feel a division is going to happen, like pretty much a bifurcation, and it becomes like a parallel Earth and like a timeline that's parallel. So those that are sort of moving out into this sort of digression or dependency on these transhumanism technologies because they haven't done sort of the inner work or connected to their own spirit or the organic ascension codes in nature and just everywhere, and with the suns lining up in this period we're in, it's always going to be there. I mean, I don't think anybody's ever, abandoned, but I think we're going to notice after a while, probably 6 months from now, clearly where you're heading and what's falling away that is larger than people or friends or things we used to be signed up for. Like on the micro scale, this is going to be a macro split. And and nothing
Right.
can stop these activations now. They didn't harvest enough energies to be able to completely annihilate the timeline. Plus, the plan B for Ascension was a whole new reconstruction they couldn't keep up with because they couldn't handle the spontaneity of another plan being in action after they hijacked the parallel Earth 5D that we were going to move into. Like, that was like, okay. But just like with the brain, you build new circuits and bridges, and we got ourselves over that hump. And they're just like, holy shit, these guys, ooh, sorry. These guys are just spot on with this. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so sorry. That's not, I know I slipped last time big time, and I apologize.
That's okay. What do you think about this whole, the whole 2012 thing that everyone was expecting some kind of, massive event or awakening to happen, and nothing obvious really happened. I don't know what your take on that is, whether it was a false event. It was all linked to the Mayan calendar, obviously, which people thought it was going to be the end of the world, which obviously didn't happen. I mean, it's been 5 years now, and I think if anything, things have got worse in the last 5 years, not better. What do you think about that?
Well, in a way, when a timeline collapses, it forms its own sort of Armageddon, and we can live those in like sort of dream or astral spaces and not actually have the physical experience unless we really need it to sort of reset and try another one. I think we just sort of are jumping around until we're like, because we don't die. And, and the thing is, sometimes we do find ourselves in situations that trap us in order to prove to ourselves, what it means to be a truly sovereign being. And, so the 2012 thing is very legit because it does relate to the Venus transits. It does relate to a time where, after all the planetary cataclysms, the physical planet has been able to move back into alignment with the galactic core that unites Andromeda and Milky Way, which opens up, our higher chakras, our galactic chakras. It starts to upgrade our DNA, and it comes through the Earth as a grounded, activating sphere that holds a 13-dimensional potential that has not been able to be grounded in the body. So it's coming up through our feet, and it's everywhere. And so 2012 was like when the hosting of the Ascension timeline shifted from the patriarchal, corrupted sort of Melchizedek lines, and it got into the hands of the beings from Andromeda and the goddess energy within men and women and within the Earth to like activate this. And so they tried to stop it. They had the Mars agenda. They've been doing all this stuff. And we've already crossed over the barrier, and the only thing that they can do is throw out propaganda and memes and attacks from weather technology to like freak people out. And yes, people are going to die, but we're only moving into another dimension when that happens. And we're trying to maintain physical form in order to change the coding so that when humans are born, they can actually pick up on the frequencies that, build the Merkaba and like the immortal self that has full on access to all multi-dimensions versus vampire that's sort of stuck and but the body's able to stay alive with these other means. And, that can be reversed anytime. So the reason nothing really happened is because we're in too slow of a density to have something that big happen all at once, because it would have completely annihilated people's physical vessel with the extreme of light that was ready to come in. And so it's almost like these brakes have been put on. People have their different stories connected to it. And that's why I can relate to the stories, but I can't say I know it to be true. The colors are correct, as far as blue avians, whatever, but that's not my stuff. But what I see is, it's just slowed down, but we did move through the gateways. And the thing is, we've all been persistent. When everything almost got sabotaged, did any of us stop doing what we're doing? I mean, we're pretty unstoppable. So, and it's getting better, even though what looks like what we look at in the world doesn't look that way. That's not where we should gauge it, because that's just going to frustrate us. We got to gauge it based on the community that we're building and the truth that we're speaking and the different things that we're willing to pay attention to within ourselves to ultimately heal and step into, the right vibration or frequency to get to where we need to be. But right now, the two are like still on top of each other. So we feel like we still can't rest, and it's still like long and drawn out. And it's just like, oh my God, like when is this ever going to end? But what I see is like it's tapering off, and in the next 6 months or after 6 months, we're going to be like, wow. And then we'll recognize that whatever about 2012 was just a door that was opening at the speed of a snail compared to it swinging wide open, and blasting too many people too quickly. And so the people that have been ready, it's just like we feel like we're suffocating, and the people who are just waking up are like in a fetal position, and we all know how that is. I still go there sometimes. But it's just and it'll all unfold, and then the beauty at the end of it all, and the great reward is, wow, we're free now, and look at the abilities we have, and like that's just falling away like dead skin, like a snake shedding its skin, and you don't go back and put that jacket back on. It's gone, and you're free of it, and we have so much to look forward to. So all that fear stuff should just be a reminder that the world's going to look very different, and let that nudge you in the right direction instead of like crush you and, cause you to lose any hope.
Mm. Do you think that we have go ahead, Sarah.
For me at least, when it seems like that right now we're going through a stage where all this karmic energy from a long time is sort of coming down upon humanity so that they can go ahead and clear that. And that's why we see all of this happening in Hollywood with the whole, sexual stuff that went on, the pedophilia, all of this is coming out. We have a lot coming out. And it's really a cleanup time for humanity right now. And it's really going to be like that for a while. And then once we clean and clear all of these energies, we can come out on top in the end.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
It's really out with the old to allow the new in, and I just can only look at it metaphorically, like it's just compost and it has nutrients, and there's no experience that we feel we need to discard that didn't have some sort of value, and we just can't be in this duality form of thinking, because that's what keeps us stuck. Once we defy that level of duality, it's just like we don't play by the matrix laws, which are false laws that aren't in harmony with our bodies or nature or our soul. And that's why people get so sick and out of balance, and we're vulnerable to accident, injury, illness, and attack.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Do you think that, you mentioned the blue avians earlier, do you think that we have help in that respect? Or do we have to deal with a lot of this on our own? Do we have like other beings, other races who are helping us through this transition? Or is it basically just down to us that we've got to do it on our own?
I think that's part of the underworld is recognizing that in a way we are on our own, and sometimes you feel incredibly abandoned in that darkness, not knowing, what to trust and what to think, and we know that maybe it's not a time to reach out to anybody because we have to figure it out on our own. It's just that feeling, and one either isolates themselves or they put themselves in the line of fire in a lot of ways, because it's sort of like being in a cocoon. You're not really meant to be around others. Or I don't know, it's sort of a hibernation. And when we do attempt to reach out to people, there are some that would fully understand and be able to help hold space so it isn't so lonely. So we realize maybe in that place we feel the most terrorized or freaked out, we can begin to change that so it's not so black and white, and this bouncing back and forth between polarity, but they can merge together. And so I always, that's why I encourage people, if you're going through those kind of things, this is what I do the one-on-one work on, with four, excuse me. And so I think to a certain respect, we are alone, but then when the darkness sort of subsides and we see everything illuminated that we didn't see because it was dark, then it's just like you're surrounded by, oh my gosh, like spirit guides, the powerful unconditional love of source, people that resonate and people that are coming out of the woodworks that you can, feel enough safety with to be able to maybe ground more in this human experience. And everything really, starts to change right in front of our eyes, and we recognize how much it isn't all on us. And, so I think we go back and forth between attracting things that make us feel isolated so we can have autonomy and know how to protect ourselves from outer influences that maybe try and think for us, and then recognize when we've strengthened ourselves enough and the lights come on that we were surrounded by love that whole time, and that there is encouragement, and the forces of nature are absolutely like such a huge part of who we are, and so is the planet and cosmos and everything it's doing to like nurture this incredible thing that's going on, and it's built into us, it's built into the whole of creation. And so once we're out of the darkness and we realize that oneness on such a powerful level, there's nothing more healing than that, because we know what it feels like to have that opposite, total separation and being in the void and nobody around, being safe and just, not able to do anything with like these like really difficult like emotions and feelings that are undermined or misunderstood, but then the other side of it all is that there is multi dimensions of beings and higher earth energies that hold the essence of that level of compassion and understanding. And so it just automatically heals the being. And then one is able to recognize that you're really healing yourself because you initiated through those gateways into that source medicine or love that you come from. And then you recognize it's you as well. But there's lower levels that people get caught on, and they think that that's where the rulership lies. And then they try and have dominance because they're, finding excuses to see others as less than, and they power trip. But ultimately, it's just like we all have access to that. And then we realize we're not even hardly alone because the whole design of creation is to return to source, because that's the only thing in the end of the day that can't be switched off. It doesn't expire. Everything else, it's like, yeah, it's a phantom Earth that they're creating and it can last for millions of years, but it's eventually going to swallow itself and turn into space dust. It does have a longevity, but it's a completely different type of longevity that just has a life cycle that keeps, it in this inversion. And once enough beings say, I don't need to go there anymore, it might create like a whole new version of creation that is like, makes this like an old book on the shelf that might even be forgotten because it's a whole new Big Bang. I don't know. I keep thinking, can we just start over? But I'm not trying to wish that either. Just like, this is like a rough draft. It's like, okay, let's just make some edits here and maybe just push it all out there again, because it's just so exhausting. Oh my God. I just can't stop processing.
Yeah. What do you think about, I read recently the earth frequency, is it called the Schumann resonance is going up. It's rising. Is that all linked to, the people waking up, or the ascension, or how is that rise in frequency affecting people?
Well, it's something that if we didn't have, mind control and social engineering and these dark agendas and all these world wars and cataclysms where we're holding incredible fragmentation and trauma, and we're easily preyed upon and controlled, if we didn't have that, we'd be more naturally unfolding into, this energy that is something we don't even need to strive for, except for the willingness to let go of everything that gets in the way, because it exists as like a true reality where everything else is sort of an imitation and an overlay in order to create sort of this harvesting food source for any kind of lower entity that has sort of lost its way, and some people aren't willing to give up the ego aspects of power to be able to be in that level of oneness, because it doesn't feed that desire to, create war. And that's because most of these beings aren't really from this universe. And so it just, I'm sorry, kind of ask your question again.
It's basically about the Schumann resonance, and
right.
how it's affecting people, because, I've heard stories that the Schumann resonance is rising, and it's supposed to be 7.8. Was it 7.83 hertz or megahertz? I can't remember now. But the frequency is rising, and obviously that must be affecting people, whether it's in a good way or a bad way, I don't know.
Well, some people, it's going to throw them into like a purging. And so when I was talking about just our relationship with the energies, it really depends where we are in our soul growth. The pain's going to be greater and the purging is going to be stronger for anybody who is not allowing themselves to let go to a sort of greater power, but that power is also them. So it's not like you have to believe in anything. You just have to be you and be connected and be able to, be co-creative with it, and take responsibility for the things that you end up manifesting, without confusing that with not holding people accountable that are crossing the line and being abusive or whatever. That's a little bit different. But the frequency is raising because of where the planetary body is and what all these astrological alignments have been doing, and where we are, in just the cycle, the 26,000 year cycle coming to an end, and what that means. So the physical body is on a soul level or on a just higher consciousness level, totally on board with that. It's the most natural, like relief, and comfortable thing to just unfold into this level of a feeling of, real liberation, and all the things that are really important to you are reflected back to you, and you can, really be comfortable, pushing the envelope on your imagination instead of like trying to have an open mind to something that really doesn't suit you or feel right. And so the fact that we have those choices and there's nothing really in control over us, it allows us to be conduits of this energy, which allows the circulation of what's coming through the earth and what's coming through the cosmos, and what's ready to be released within our soul creates this sort of like, it all locks into place, where the chakras and the differentiation between dimensions begins to dissolve, and all the chakras begin to sort of like merge together, and the veils begin to lift between, different dimensional energy, and we just begin to expand. And when that all dissolves, we start to just be like in this, sacred union energy, which the earth grids are designed to emanate, but they got compromised with dark technologies and things that unplugged those forces so that we wouldn't be able to achieve it. So the fact that those things haven't won, and our consciousness has held enough intelligence to be able to override all of that, the frequency is creating a massive purging and deprogramming. But when we allow ourselves to recognize, nobody's asking you to leave yourself, you're getting closer to yourself and the authentic self that you long for and miss, and you recognize that that's where the real power is coming out of, then you could begin to relax into it and recognize, you're not trying to adopt something new. It's not about having to understand everything about disclosure or consciousness. It's about settling into yourself enough to have that direct connection. And then the rest of it will come, along accordingly, on an organic sort of level where it's more comfortable. I mean, I think we're all sick of feeling tossed about, like, and just, it's not been a steady road, at least for me. It's been just utter chaos most of the time.
Yeah,
and I just,
I was speaking to some friends about this the other day, how they too could feel like time was going in and out, different timelines. And it did feel like that felt like a stormy sea. And even I was feeling it, like being tossed around. And it's funny because I was, at one point, I was literally just feeling timelines split through so fast. It was almost like a movie reel.
Right? Oh, yeah, that's a good way to put it, too. Because that's what it is, really. I mean, different time, it's just a different channel, it's a different movie, and it's just like, okay, well, we can set our intention and be proactive in manifesting a script that, like, leads to, like, the greatest thing ever. I mean, we have infinite imagination to draw upon to infuse our creative energies with pretty much anything we want. And all the matrix energies is doing is trying to program that to feed something that we don't need to be feeding, because we don't need to have any dependency on it. So when it comes down to the stuff we hear that might cause fear for people, things about the economy and our basic survival needs and what we feel in a human body we're going to be missing or we're going to feel threatened. Well, this is why we have to start advancing ourselves, because we have the ability to be advanced enough to not need any of it at all. But it requires people to get, out of the programming and just be willing, at least just to be a decent person and not harm anyone, just for starters.
Yeah, I agree.
That's hard for a lot of people.
What was that, Sarah?
I said that is quite hard for a lot of people. Even the maturity and how you interact with others, I've realized in society, it's very, very low. And I think that comes from a disconnect, from their souls. It's causing this.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of people are disconnected from themselves in a way, aren't they? Disconnected from their spirit, their soul, whatever you want to call it. That's why a lot of people just walk around almost like zombies, I guess.
Right? Yeah, and they're plugged into something else, and that energy that they're not allowing themselves to anchor into their body, it just is very vulnerable. But because the two belong together, and there's a greater, force, almost like magnets, that'll draw the two to want to come back together again. One still goes on a journey and gets to experience things that are, going on that you can turn it around and say it's almost like a voyage. It's different though when you're fully asleep and in a trance and never snap out of it. And so, to a certain degree, we all have that choice. So, we can make excuses for each other, and we should, because it's none of our business the rate at which other people are choosing to awaken. I mean, we can just plant seeds and all, but there's just a different process of what a person integrates along the way and what they're ready to let go of, and we don't have to get in people's business too much.
But do you think that everyone is supposed to wake up? Is there like an idea that the ascension is for everyone, that we all have an equal chance, or is it more that some people have no chance?
You always have a chance, but the thing is, the way things were constructed is there are certain embodiments or DNA availabilities to all beings. And it's pretty much the same across the board, that pretty much every human that's been born has 12-strand DNA and comes from the highest potential of what one can achieve. Beings that have compromised that or compromised their DNA and hybridized with those beings, that have created sort of hybrids that bounce back and forth a little bit and have, sort of these issues. I mean, we're all sort of afflicted by this to some degree, or we wouldn't be here. And that's part of this large and huge rehabilitation that we're all kind of coming to terms with and having to sort it out within ourselves in order to put out the frequency that shows some sort of healing of everything from, those galactic wars that we hold in our DNA to just the archetypal dramas and then the stuff we get from our parents and all the damage that's been done through all the mind control. And so that's compromised our DNA, but we all have access to energies that can heal it and turn it back on. And we're all sort of built the same way. But those that have really compromised themselves, they can uncompromise themselves. And nobody is, stuck forever. But the thing that will die out is the non-biological entities that never really had a life force to begin with. That'll sort of settle back into the earth. And there might be a lot more numbers than we expected because there's so much engineering going on. But if a soul did inhabit an artificial body and it's a legitimate soul, that soul will, of course, live on. Just like, our physical bodies can biodegrade. So, I mean, we're kind of just more fleshy sort of robots. I mean, but we're under the control of, our conscience or our soul experiences or our higher mind. And if we can stay connected to it, it will come, into our awareness, the larger picture. And everybody has access to that, to download into their body or to advance something or to create a different reincarnation where they do have the opportunity to resolve some of that. And overcome. So, everybody has a little mini war in them that they are destined to win, but how long that war is for each individual depends. But the sort of finish line or the place that one can get to once they get to a certain place in it, where we can all feel like equals and one in that unity while we can, appreciate our differences. I mean, I think we all have access to that, and that's where we're all headed. And we come, back in a form that depends on the dimension we choose to exist upon, but we have full access to, choosing any kind of experience without something locking us in. And the only reason we would be locked in is if we lost a piece of ourselves and we allowed it. And I don't like all those cliches of, oh, well, if it's happening, you allowed it on some level. It's like, I get it to a degree, but at the same time, there's theft and there's things that are against people's consent. And we know that all too well. I don't have to go into it, but so there's that fine line between the soul journey you chose to embark upon and how you might have gotten infiltrated and abused along the way. And the question is, how much was that a part of the agreement? Well, I don't think we really signed up for that, but I think we have to have the totality of the experience to bring light into like the most horrific places and just be strong enough to keep pushing through the soil to pop back out again. And everybody has access to those laws because they're cosmic and natural laws connected to what we see in nature. And no, I just feel when I say unconditional love, I mean it for all beings for sure. And I feel that everybody, no matter what they have to go through to get there, will never be shut out of being one with source.
Yeah. Well, this goes into things like soul. Go ahead, Sarah. Are you saying something?
Yes, I was going to ask about artificial timelines. And, with all the work I've done on my part, I've noticed that, things like artificial food, things like beauty products that have heavy metals, all those things I feel are really, really, when we use those things, they connect us to artificial timelines because they're not allowing the energy of nature to flow through us. So this is some of the work that I did last year, and I think we did a show on it where I spoke in depth about this with my friend Bridie, and she's just brilliant because she does a whole bunch of detoxing and stuff like that. And then I started to realize that they were literally using all of these substances that are toxic for the body to stream people's energy to help support artificial timelines. They were plugged into an artificial sort of robotic consciousness, and this was manifest in the timelines from that consciousness.
Right. And that's part of, that's how it's all set up. I mean, not just the programmings and what we listen to and what we hear, but it's in the chemicals, it's in the food, it's how everything's created and what we ingest, because it tricks the body into like this whole other kind of addiction dependency thing versus being nurtured and being, you know, holistic about it and being able to sort of step into the next level, which ends up being very painful with all those toxins in one's body. So it does create sort of a trap. And but I think if the consciousness is really getting it and waking up, it can override that. But if it's still kind of stuck beneath and it doesn't know how to think outside of that frequency of what those products can do, those are the hardest ones. I mean, those that are walking around in our society, that it's like, I almost feel like we're in different dimensions and I'm invisible and I could walk right through them. I'm like, I don't even know what I'm doing.
I agree with that, yes. Mm-hmm. But, you know, and there's a quote, I think it's Antoine LaVey, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's Antoine LaVey who said that most Americans are Satanists. He said something like and I was asked about this quote the other day. No, and you know, I really pondered on this quote because of the fact that it's something that people, you know, usually they don't understand what he meant. And I realized I understand what he meant. You know, I think our body's a temple. It is a temple and it flows through, you know, it's supposed to flow through cosmic energy. It's supposed to free flow with God, the real true God, which is this divine force that flows through everything. And when people harm their bodies by putting in these foods, you know, all this fast food, by just putting in all these substances and everything, they are, in a way, harming their very soul energy. They're blocking themselves off from God, harming their soul energy, and harming their bodies, which are a temple. So they are worshiping lower in a way without they don't have to pray, they don't have to do any dark magic or anything. They're doing it just by harming their bodies. And I think that's what he meant. You know, if you go in, yes. And I realized just how deeply this is in society, whether it's pharmaceuticals, whether, you know, they go into cells and they block out, they literally numb your emotions. We now found out that things like ibuprofen and Advil now make people emotionally colder, and this is coming out in mainstream news. So think about it. We are cutting off the literal flow of God. So yes, people are, without saying it, without exercising it, they are worshiping lower forces just by being energetically down in those frequencies. And that's what I believe he meant by that.
Oh, yeah. No, or even if you didn't, what you've taken from it is really, I think, the best direction a person can go. And I absolutely agree. And that's what people have to understand, because they can be going to church on Sunday or they could be following some sort of thing. But if they don't take a hard look at, you know, what they're ingesting and what they're putting on their bodies and what they're choosing to like energize as far as a way of life, and they don't understand where that, you know, is actually going, you know, it's being siphoned, it's being used, it's being trapped. I mean, that's that sort of, I wouldn't even call it ignorant bliss, because I don't think it's very blissful. I don't think they're having a great time. You know, there's, you know, short-term instant gratification sort of things that one can do and invest in, but it's like a really bumpy up and down road. And that's why, you know, they go to the doctor who gives them meds because they're bipolar or something like that. And that's, you know, not really fair, you know. And that's why I feel like, you know, all of us are doing our best to, you know, encourage those souls to go in a place where their beings can come into balance, because, you know, we're born into this mental illness, and then it's projected onto most humans that they're the ones with the problem. And so, yeah, if people can begin to see what you just said, and the fact that, you know, you put an essential oil on and a crystal or stone on instead, you're going to have a completely different day, and you're going to start to, you know, recognize that there's a huge difference. And if you really do want to be that temple, because they do care about Christ energy. I mean, religious people care, but they have to follow that whole deal with, you know, how you just put it so well. You know, it's just like, look at what you're doing.
Well, and you think about it that all religions, to me, the one world government has already happened, and that's everybody worshiping the wrong consciousness, and that's the religion all over the world that has taken, you know, sacred text, and it has twisted them and just made it people into slaves through them, where when it was meant for them to sort of, you know, have spiritual freedom and to evolve from, it's been twisted around. And there's a very good movie with, I think with Denzel Washington, called The Book of Eli, about this. It depicts it perfectly well in that book. But, you know, and this is the thing, like, you know, there's a good verse in the Bible that says that the stones, the rocks cry out my name. Well, you know, when you look at a rock, it's not crying out Christ or Jesus or God. But you know what? We know now that rocks, you're right, have frequency. They have higher frequencies in them, and we can use them to heal. Crystals have higher frequencies in them. So when the Bible said they're calling out my name, they have the frequency. And people are taking things too literally. We're not understanding that everything, you know, works on tones and frequencies, not on literal, like when they read it. And this is quite interesting how the Bible is encoded with a lot of stuff like that, and how many religious books are from very ancient writings, and it's just taken so literally. This is the problem we're having. But if we join all of this together, if we join our knowledge of science, we now know that stones have frequency. We can align that to this verse in the Bible that says, the rocks call out my name. So if we line these things up together, it starts to create a big, amazing picture. And it provides a lot of answers for the questions that people have.
Yeah, and there's freedom teachings within all of those texts, and they all got altered. I mean, the Emerald Tablets got altered by the Anunnaki and made unrecognizable, really. And, you know, there's a lot of distortions in most of the texts that people would refer to that have all the teachings of, you know, what it means to go through that inner process or those initiations to get into that direct alignment, into that, whatever, Christ consciousness, I guess a lot of people would say. But I think those texts need to be healed because because oh my gosh, not just that.
There is something else I want to ask you, Laura. A lot of people, when they're like really like at rock bottom, they turn to, you know, things like religion for answers. You know, they go to church, they pray for answers, and, you know, obviously they don't get those answers. What would you say to those people? You know, what else could they do, you know, when someone is down on their luck, when they're really in that lowest of low place, you know, rather than going to church? What would you suggest that they do?
Well, you know, it's really good to just get a reflection of, you know, where you're at. I mean, working with cards doesn't, you know, they've been misused, and a lot of people use that for sort of fortune telling, and or there's been something sort of projected onto them. But when you can really work with them to understand yourself more, so that there's more colors connected to whatever emotional just funk you might feel like you're in, and you're not able to process loss or feel the larger picture, or feel any reassurance from anybody around you or even yourself. You know, working with things like the I Ching or a good tarot card deck. I work with the Mother Piece and some galactic decks. You know, it just helps give a reflection, and it tells you what to do in the books. I mean, it's easy to follow. You can refer to it, and it'll really take you on a journey, because these are, you know, real archetypes. When we had planetary explosions that fragmented, I mean, it split consciousness, and so it formed all these sort of different archetypes and personalities that we're all made of. And I would say, you know, if you don't feel called to doing any work with tools, you know, use writing and art, you know, as a tool to help you to see what's going on in your unconscious self. And don't talk yourself out of it saying, oh, I'm not a good artist, or, oh, I don't really have anything to say. It's like, I don't feel like I have anything to say, but you know, get me going. I have a lot to say. Or you give me Facebook and I'm like, oh my God, I better tone this down a little. But give yourself a chance to just express, because you'll get to know yourself, and you might really surprise yourself, because there's a much larger picture, and there's different agreements that people have. And there's so many, this is such a multifaceted experience that we're so limited to in a 3D sort of perspective, in a sort of the way the programmings have impacted us. We don't get our answers met at church. There's pedophilia in church, so it's a huge betrayal. There's new age deceptions, and sometimes it feels like there's nowhere to turn. So what I encourage is turn to yourself, but maybe align with people that are all into understanding, you know, what we're made of on an energetic level, on a chakra level, on a DNA level, how that corresponds with everything in creation, and how, you know, right now we're working with these dualities, that the dark part and the uncomfortable part is never a fixed energy. That is just the process of moving through like an ego death to get closer and closer to the true source that you are, that everybody is. So you have to look at it like whatever's going, it's uncomfortable. Just like throwing up's uncomfortable, it sucks. here you are, like upheaval and like all this stuff is wanting to come out and it's not pleasant. So, but it's temporary and then you feel better afterwards. So I guess, just allow yourself to move through the process. Don't judge it. Don't follow some need to be enlightened, just be authentic and allow yourself to come into balance. Worry about all that later and listen to the messages your body's trying to tell you. And get closer to your body and your life when it breaks down on you versus leaving it or abandoning it for somebody else to take over and tell you how to heal and tell you, kind of what to do or what to believe. Have discernment with the kind of people you're drawing to your life, because ultimately we need to support each other's empowerment because we're all healers of ourselves and we're all connected to source. We can't do that for each other. So I would just allow yourself to become empowered and use writing, creativity, or some sort of thing that can reflect back to you where you're at to take you more into the beauty of the story that you're living versus feeling bounced around by the emotionality of it all. Because when you start to add pictures to it, it becomes more beautiful because you realize, all you really want is true love. All you want is safety. All you want is for your family to be okay and to feel connected. And, we all want those things.
Yeah, that's true. I think a lot of ways it's all part. Go ahead, Sarah.
I think that for me, myself, just encouraging people, the first steps just to get healthy, and, just to try to take a couple of minutes to silent your mind and even stare at a candle and imagine all your worries burning away. I think those things really, really help. You don't have to start anything drastic, just simple, small things will definitely get you there.
Yeah, I totally encourage that with a lot of clients. And I even created a tool where you have a compost bin of all the things you need to let go of. You have a thing where you write down all the things that you get triggered about during the day that remind you of what you should acknowledge and integrate because it's already there. And then another one that has all the seeds that you wish to plant. Every time you have a revelation or an epiphany about something you want to manifest in the future, you put it somewhere. And you just sort of keep track, maybe just in a week or two worth of time. And then kind of look at it. You burn the compost. You really integrate into your heart all the things that one should have gratitude for, and then really appreciate the fact that you can manifest all the seeds that you've been planting. And you might, put a crystal in there and then wear it every day, or just acknowledge these things in your own mind. But tools do help, I agree. And, if we do something symbolic, it creates a mark in our reality versus just thinking things and not turning them into something that we can reflect upon and say, hey, I did it.
Mm.
I did something symbolic to make that statement, and it can be more grounded versus, being all over the place with that air quality.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is to do with the programming, isn't it? Really, people are, I guess, programmed to, when they're down and out. It's one of the places they need to go to is the church for answers. But I guess getting around the programming is something that they need to learn to do as well, to know that that's not the right answer. You need to look within yourself for the answers rather than following a church or a religion or following spiritual leaders or whatever you want to call them for answers, because you won't find them.
No, you won't. You have to go into the places that are most uncomfortable because everything else is sort of putting a mask on it. You confess your sins, but does that really change it? It just makes you feel like you've wiped the slate, but are you getting to the root of it? I mean, the thing is, when we face the uncomfortable, when we face our inner demons, and when we face the unconscious wounds, we're actually doing the purification work to get closer to that source energy that religion teaches us we need to worship. And so nobody makes the effort to become it or to be, to recognize that it's within us to save ourselves because we hold that. And that's all they ever wanted to teach. Mm-hmm. And religion's like, it's all outside of you. And it's like, okay, well, I'm sorry for all this that I did last week. And then you're talking probably to I don't even want to say it,
And the thing is that when you truly do inner work, you can't, you'll have nightmares about it. If you continuously do that sort of stuff, you'll have nightmares. And a lot, for me at least, like I said, I was speaking the other day about this, and I said, I don't want to go to bed at night feeling heavy because I've done something stupid when I know to do better than that. But with religion, it's basically you can still do crap and just go pray and it's okay, And that's a huge problem there. And I see a lot of people who they do the same thing over and over again, and they're not truly changing themselves. They're praying about it, They're like, well, I pray about it, but that's not, they're not doing the inner work, because if they did, they wouldn't continuously do those sort of things that are harmful to themselves and to others.
Right, totally. And the thing is, it has to be in every moment. We're the temple, but we're in this, larger, really sacred space that we can work with and have a direct connection with spirit, without needing anything, because it's in our nature already. It's built into us. And to think when you're down and out that you have to go somewhere to find it or get it, then you've missed that it exists.
Okay, guys, we're just going to go to a commercial break. Can't actually hear the music coming in, but it is time for the break. So we'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, guys, just mute your microphones.
You're listening to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message. The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
And welcome back to The Divine Truth on Revolution Radio. I hope I'm still on air. I can't actually hear the bumper adverts. But before we continue with the show, just like to remind you that Revolution Radio is a listener-supported station. We do rely on your donations to keep us on air. So please do go to freedomslips.com and go to the support us section where you can make a donation, or you can join our monthly support club where you can make a regular monthly donation starting at only $10. You can also buy one of our seed packs starting at only $60. All of our seed packs contain non-GMO, non-hybrid heirloom seeds. So if you have the opportunity to make a donation, please do go to freedomslips.com and do so. And now we'll return to the show. Hopefully we still have Laura. Are you still here?
I'm still here.
And Sarah, are you still here?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay. Now I want to continue in the second half, talk about a few other topics. There was one question that somebody asked me to ask you, Laura, and it's to do with Rh negative blood. And there's a lot of stories and videos and posts about Rh negative blood and people who have Rh negative blood and why they're different. Can you talk about what you know about Rh negative blood and why people with it are different, if they are different anyway?
Well, Rh negative, I think there's a lot of, we're dealing with different blood types as well. We can have a different, actual letter with the Rh negative factor, but the blood's still going to be different. When it really comes down to it, the Rh negative is looked at like it's extraterrestrial DNA, even though we all have extraterrestrial DNA. When it comes down to blood types, it's more like a dominance. Here's the dominant expression of this particular blood and maybe experiences it's had in the past. So when we look at extraterrestrial factors that create the Rh negative, we're dealing with different seedings and different hybridizations that create that kind of blood type. So one would want to look at sort of the chronological history, even though nothing's really chronological, connected to A, B, and O, and A, and B. So then you add the Rh negative factor, and that's when these hybridizations started to happen. But there's different, types that will give you an idea about, maybe what level of that energy you are, or what particular type of hybrid you are, like Syrian Anunnaki, Palladian Anunnaki, Nephilim. I'm sure if one looked closer at blood, you'd be able to see that stuff. But supposedly the Rh negative, they're able to be, easily abducted because of maybe some compatibility with a race that needs some of that genetic information. When those are positives, if you're not an Rh negative, supposedly you're easily cloned. And so, and because they can pick up, from birth, what type of blood type you have, there's different agendas connected to, looking for specific things. And I think they're probably looking for things beyond just the Rh negative or not. Right. But I do think it's like more of a dominance thing. of what one carries, but it could change. I don't think it's something that I don't think we experience the same thing each lifetime. And so whatever our blood type is, maybe Rh negatives have more of a connection with a particular star group, whereas those who are positive might have a connection with a particular star group that first, inhabited this earth and held that sort of earth energy as far as the Rh positive, but still is connected to extraterrestrials that, once inhabited. When we look at the early colonization, it's just there were different invasions and everything's territory fighting, and, basically also fighting over us and who control gen is going to be most dominant. Now they've all sort of created this federation and have united because they're just like, let's just stop them. We can't handle it. So, again, I think it's just different for the different letters connected to them. And the native energies, also can represent times after the Anunnaki when the DNA, showed that connection with the monkey or whatever. So the timeline is much larger, I think, and there's much a wider spectrum between the positives and negatives than, it's simply being one's extraterrestrial and one isn't, and one happened after the Anunnaki, and forgetting that there's actually one for before as well, which is also carrying of a positive, supposedly the Gaia energy, but it mixes with the negative in order to anchor and ground some of those higher systems back onto Earth. And so even the benevolent groups have created hybridization programs in order to make sure that those are coming to Earth to help activate everybody else.
Right. So does this go back like pretty much like thousands of years to like, I don't know if you believe in the stories, the Zachariah Sitchin, that where I guess we're a genetically engineered race, and we were put on this earth for a specific reason. I don't know what you think about that, if that's linked to why there are so many different blood types, because you would think that if we're all the same, we'd all have the same blood type, but obviously that's not the case.
No, because there's different seedings of the human race. There's different souls that have chosen to incarnate into a human body, but that is certainly not the norm. I mean, it's just kind of like coming in. We have walk-ins that sort of represent that, and there's too many experiences to put down to just a blood type thing. And it depends what frequency you want to carry also, because when we look at positive and negative, we got to look at, well, what is positive and negative anywhere? One's electric, one's magnetic. That's what the grids are made of. And so we all have a different blood that runs through our veins in order to do something related to the grid work, which is completely multidimensional because it goes, all the way to, all dimensions and completes the whole 12 strand, DNA with access to even more than that, beyond what we can even imagine. And I, it's more linked to similar to how we have astrological signs. It doesn't mean that you don't carry the other qualities of the rest of the signs. It means that that's the particular thing that you chose to vibrate at in order to do sort of a larger healing thing. Because I think as a humanity, we all came in with the same potential, and it's like puzzle pieces that have been broken apart. And, as we come to put them back together again, we also recognize that we're the whole picture. And yeah, so, we all have a link to a particular part of the planet that we exist upon to do healing work with the land there. And whatever we're carrying in our birth charts and in our blood, I think links to something as well, because if we're going to have all this hybridization, we all have to learn to end the war by allowing ourselves to be at peace with the very, very different types of races that have come into, one particular human vessel.
Right.
A lot of souls feel really trapped in their genetics because of the hybridization, and there's a lot of anger, and it's keeping things, really dark because of that too. And then of course it's fed upon. So, the best thing to do is all our diversities, we just have to say, okay, let's unite on all this, or else we're not going to be able to take the next step, because all those advanced races have been hybridized with different races of reptilians. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, that determines blood type, and the copper blood type that's in the so-called blue bloods, they carry more copper.
Yeah.
And there's something about that whole thing.
Right. So is as part of your work, do you ask people like what blood type they are, and does that change, what you would say to someone if they had an Rh negative or positive blood type, that you would give them different advice as to how to heal or how to move forward, as it were? Does that affect their, I guess how you would treat them, I guess.
Absolutely not. I don't even ask. And if it were to come up and I were to, have that sort of thing come up in a reading, I might notice things in their chart connected to, I might learn a lot, actually. Maybe I should ask of the differences, because there's a lot of people that are getting a lot of the upgrades, or they carry something that allows them to advance themselves pretty much like with no issue, and other people really struggle. Mm-hmm. And if I could understand the relationship between like how a person relates to the different elements and different dimensions, and saw some sort of patterning in their blood type, I would totally do that. But no, I wouldn't treat them differently as far as is there a better or worse? And plus, I don't.
It would be sort of this interesting to know if a lot of the people who are coming with the same problems all have the same blood type,
right.
or just that there may be some link there as to why they're all having.
Yes, maybe I should do that.
I know that Sarah works with people, and that's one of the questions she asked them, but that's to do with their diet, because everyone's diet is different. And she uses a lot of treatments based on their blood type. Certain blood types, they have to have meat, or they can't be vegan, or it's very difficult for them to become vegan because of their blood type. So that type of thing as well.
Yeah, I had a book about that, and I still remember a lot of the things that it said wouldn't be good for me. But yeah, no, it's really important to know that stuff. I don't quite go into that side of things, but if I were to, I would say that's the way to go, because when people create a movement out of a type of food that everybody should be eating and create sort of this weirdness around it, it's like we got to let each other just be whoever we are, and allow ourselves to just be on the journey to experience it, and whatever comes along with it comes along with it. I don't know why people get so political and concerned, but yeah, I think it's important people eat what's best for their blood, and that's awesome she does that. That's awesome you do that, Sarah.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to comment on that, Sarah.
It's logical, really. If you take per se a Eskimo who's eaten fish all of his life, and you put him on a vegan diet, he's going to get very sick and ill and die. And his genetics for generations have adapted. They're adapted to having fish. So when we say that a person should just have this certain diet and for everybody, and we define one diet for everybody, that's wrong, because everybody has different factors in their DNA, different factors in their lineage and their cultures, the way that they have eaten for hundreds of years, their parents, their grandparents, and so on, generations. And you're coded according to that, not according to one diet for everyone. So I really, really think that that's the way we should go, rather than just defining everybody should be in one diet.
Mm.
Yep, totally. And we got to translate that into how we respect each other's belief systems or opinions about the information that have to do with disclosure. Because the real attack on us is that we're going to be in opposition to each other, and it's going to be disharmonious, and it gets really ego-based sometimes, and that's okay. But that level of understanding the differences in people's diets needs to translate into understanding diversity, period. I think that's the ultimate lesson, and that's like a really good place to start, because that directly goes into our bodies, and that can change our consciousness to be more accommodating on all these other aspects of our existence.
Mm-hmm. And I agree with that. I think a lot of the problems in this world are based on things like religion and race and stuff like that. But I think a lot of the people will probably, how would I say, it doesn't really matter what race you are. You can have Rh negative blood, whether you're Asian, white, or whatever. I think, and your diet can be different depending, like Sarah says, if you're an Eskimo, you're going to have a different diet to someone living in Africa or India or America or whatever. But I don't know where I was going with that. but you sort of, I think a lot of the problems are based that, we are different, but we're not different. A lot of the wars are based on religion or race, and the idea that we have to, hate someone because of the color of their skin or because of their religion, I think is a concept which has been programmed into us to cause the conflict that is in the world today. And I think if more people moved away from that and looked within themselves more, and they would see that we're not actually that different at all.
Yeah,
I don't know what you think about that, Laura.
Oh, I mean, I absolutely agree, and it just seems like it's hard to wrap one's head around the fact that that's even an issue, and that we have to break through that level of disconnect with each other. It just blows my mind, because it just doesn't make any sense that would even come up as a human issue. I mean, the human issues is that we need to take care of our earth and our children and our families, and have the spiritual maturity to allow that level of diversity. Because why does anybody have to control somebody else? Why does anybody have to think the exact same way you do? Because nobody's saying you can't live that way. So why don't you just enjoy it and leave everybody else alone? Now, if it impacts something that's obvious and creates something toxic that that could be harmful, then everybody kind of needs to look at that and take the higher road and bring it into balance. But most of the things that are wrong that produce that come from that conquer and divide mentality, and how all these wars have created this division and all this programming, and just our relationship with ourselves, and that's the foundation of everything. And
what do you think is, like, if there is one problem in the world that you think is the biggest issue that we need to deal with, what would you say is that one issue?
I would say the distribution of wealth, and that all the hidden secret stuff going on within the cabal needs to be brought to the light, so that justice can take place, or else the police force and everything that has ever been created to protect the human race is a joke. Because if that's really the principles that we come into society to agree upon, and we're being run, our countries are being run by the greatest criminals, but yet we have law enforcement that puts people away every day in jail. It's like that level of imbalance is so incredibly toxic and horrid that the number one priority for any leader would be a distribution of wealth, which would then allow those that are hoarding all the money and keeping it amongst themselves, would begin to come out of the woodwork. So if the focus is that all communities that, are basically in starvation and don't have basic human needs, that those be addressed first, and we just take care of our people, and those that create war for any reason, be brought to the surface. We have to have the right leaders, and the leaders have to encourage everybody to recognize themselves as leaders, so that they can spread it wherever they go. And it just has to be this huge recognition that exists within ourselves to just not put up with it anymore, and demand better. We don't have to vote for these people. We don't have to be connected to this. I mean, there's all sorts of people willing to stand up there and say this needs to be done, so let's do it. And as long as there's suffering in the world that where people's lands have been compromised, or they've been robbed somewhere in history even, they need to be taken care of first. And these energy weapons and all that has to be shut down, as far as the manipulation of weather and the weaponization of everything. And the crimes against humanity has to be busted. So I think those two things go hand in hand. So I would say that's pretty much the priority, to get the basic balance at least, returning, as we meet the needs of those that are really, really in need, and drop all this other BS, which is a total waste of time. It's beyond ludicrous and childish. It's like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah, but I would say that the whole system itself is completely corrupt, and we should start from scratch again. But the people in power who have the money and the wealth and the power to control everything would disagree with that. They would do anything to keep control. So it's almost like David and Goliath, isn't it? Really, in a way, that we're fighting a battle against. We've got bows and arrows, and they've got guns and bombs and weapons. It's a bit like trying to fight a losing battle, isn't it? In a way.
If we withdraw from it, recognizing we don't need to be dependent on it, and we recognize, the power of our consciousness and the things that we can do with it, we're better off without them, so that we can get moving on with all this. If we recognize we don't have to have any sort of dependency, and they recognize that they've lost their food source, they're just going to sort of fall away, and we're going to be the empowered ones. And so we just have to let go of the things that they manipulate us into thinking that we need.
Mm-hmm. What do you think about this idea of having a breakaway society, almost, where people who are awake and know what's going on will separate from the rest of society and form their own group, as it were? Do you think that would be a good idea?
I'm sorry, what was the last part?
Like to have a breakaway society where people like us who are awake and aware of what's going on to form their own society and live separate from the rest of the world. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah. I mean, and that I think is part of the bifurcation is that we're going to notice that the forces of nature are encouraging it, and that it really falls into place. And we can have some kind of separation from having to be in the mix of all this when we've left enough information and enough of a doorway for others to sort of see through, that is sort of everybody's resources. It's not just for the special. It's not built on religious principles. It's based in the architecture that's factual, and at the same time we have to have everybody has to have their flexibility with it to sort of understand it on their own terms. And that line of energy will always be there, that sort of telepathic connection. There'll always be some sort of encouraging of those that still aren't awakened, but we have to do it in a different way than we're doing it now. I feel, and I can sense that there is sort of a branching off happening. And in that, with our ability to detach and just say, okay, it's just time to go, because I've been feeling it for a while. I feel like a huge portion of humanity is going to say, wait a second, we're not willing for you guys to go. You're the light on this planet. We need unity consciousness. We need to put our consciousness together, because they're going to feel something like a survival trigger in them that says, wait a second, I don't want to be left behind. I don't want to be stuck in this muck. I don't want to be, they'll feel the loss. And I think that's going to create an acceleration, and that's where we are right now. And that's why people are purging and sort of going through this incredible reaction to having to let it go, because I really do think that humanity on a massive scale is going to be moving through this ascension. Whereas before I'm like, oh, it's probably just, a small group. I don't really see that anymore, honestly. But I mean, I'm flexible with my beliefs on it too. I mean, maybe tomorrow, never mind.
But what do you think about, a lot of the government's military are using hidden technology, secret weapons, things like time travel technology, weather technology, and that type of thing to manipulate people and to manipulate their agenda. What do you think about the technologies that they're using against humanity? Things like HARP to control weather, things like, I don't know if you know anything about things like the time looking glass technology and that type of thing. We did a show recently with Andrew Basiago. We talked about that, about the hidden technologies that they're using against humanity. But if they're using all this against us, what kind of, we don't really stand a chance, do we really? If they can see the future, they can see what can happen, and they can then plan for it and manipulate it to their own agenda.
They used to be able to, but the looking glass technologies, they weren't able to see anything past 2012. And the looking glass technologies were actually used when I was when there was an attempted recruitment to Mars thing that I was in. Those were the technologies that they were using in order to create that timeline. But at around 2012, it's like they weren't able to see anymore. But when you work with like chronovision, you can sort of project beyond 2012, but it more has to do with the probability of that particular individual's path. The person that's actually looking through the chronovisor. But the looking glass technology isn't that much of an issue anymore, but it did help to construct timelines that people can still, move into, or because they're still artificial intelligence. They still exist, but things have changed a bit since, the Mars agenda got more exposed, and shows like this, come out, and all of us, have, done what we're doing. I'm losing the.
But what do you think about things like NASA, are planning trips to Mars now?
But all that technology, I guess
even, even though we already know that there is, groups already on Mars, but we're fed this lie through NASA that we're still using rocket technology to get to the moon and get to Mars and all this kind of thing, when we all know that they've got things like, the secret space program using much far more advanced technology than any of that. Yeah,
well, we don't really have to be too concerned about it, because all that outer stuff already exists within us. Like, I mean, as far as, the chakras go, the planetary energies, the consciousness of every planetary body, the whole, grid system on the earth, and because it got overlaid with these negative technologies, and we are dealing with, all these technologies beyond what we have, we have to remember that the elements that we hold within us are connected, to the earth. But when we go into sort of a higher frequency with it, we can counteract the negative technologies, because the implants only really affect us on a lower chakra level, and they block our ability to go beyond the 7 chakras that have kept us kind of locked into this reincarnation cycle and amnesia and all this kind of thing. If we can break through those barriers in this particular incarnation, we can harness the energy of the elements, and no matter what they use as sort of like weather weaponry, or, superstorms, or, anything where all of a sudden we're at the mercy of these guys with this big stuff. Well, we're only going to be at the mercy of it if we let ourselves be victimized in this time and start to digress ourselves into more polarity of being enslaved versus those that have their hands on all the alien technology and everything, and have, they've held dominion over a particular timeline that a lot of people might still be attached to, people we even know, because that timeline's still pretty strong. But the thing is, because they can't say anything past 2012, they don't have a grip on any souls. So souls might stay locked in sort of an enslavement scenario, not realizing that they could free themselves, whereas for the last 26,000 years, that hasn't been very possible. So right now, it's a matter of saying, I'm not going down that road, because the other one's absolutely and totally available. It has been since 2009, 2012 was the major activation, and the end of it is supposedly the end of this year, 2017, but the activations will still continue. It's not like it's gone. It's just, this is the peak of it. Everything else is purging now. And the thing is, nothing can make that go away. And so everybody's having a response to it, and it'll eventually supersede these dark technologies. And those things will be ineffective, because they harvest our energies in order to power themselves up. Whereas we get powered up by spirit, and we move into greater abilities than these technologies hold. And that's where we cross the bridge into the ascension energies. But people that aren't willing to look at that, and they deny all this, and they just ignore it and stay plugged in, that's not such a good scenario.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. This goes into things like transhumanism. I don't know what you think about that. This whole agenda where they're integrating technology into people. You can see it already now with artificial limbs and different types of technology, where by 2045 they're saying that they can actually create a being where you can transfer your soul, being, whatever consciousness, into this artificially created being, and then you would be able to live, for thousands of years. What do you think about that idea, that taking over, taking almost humanity away from us, becoming a race of immortal cybernetic type beings?
I think this is our chance to step away from that particular timeline, because the other one is completely open. But if we weren't able to understand that, many people would fall prey to the trap of transhumanism. I think sometimes it's easy to feel like, and I slip into this too, like we don't have a choice, and this is going to be put upon us, and we're going to be further trapped. And that's a legitimate concern. And, it takes concern to, look at a different direction, which I know that we, all understand and feel from time to time as well. And I think it's easy to just bounce back and forth between the two. And we kind of have to at this point to be able to have discernment to know one from the other. But, because the other one's opening up and it's much more organic, we want to allow these upgrades to happen, and we want to accelerate so that, we're 2 steps ahead, rather than getting hooked in even more, because they act like tentacles, and implants and stuff become a part of our biological body, as we know, and they become a part of the skin. Then we have ethereal implants too. So the more we're willing to bust through all of that during this time, the more the bifurcation will completely separate us. Mm-hmm. And this is why this window period is so accelerated, because this is when we have to at least have a clue enough to not falsely invest ourselves in something that could compromise us. And maybe we've gone down those timelines before, and we're coming back, giving warnings. Maybe we've gone and finished, well, not finished, but went on the other timeline that I'm talking about that is much more organic. The thing is, we can have mastery at any stage in the game when we start to understand the way the game's being played and what we need to do to just simply, break free. So I have confidence a lot of souls will be able to. and it won't feel completely like torture as much as it'll be like an alien government that keeps you in a artificial system, and where you rank amongst that is dependent on how much you're willing to stand in alliance with it versus being the resistance. That the resistance, not on the higher levels that are warning all of us, but the one that gets created once they realize that they didn't pay attention to the warnings that we're giving.
Well, I think we already have an alien government myself, but
absolutely one where the alien, disclosure where you're able to actually see the alien forms, because disclosure will have happened, and then they'll be like, okay, here we are now. Now you can see us without our ability to shapeshift into human form or maintain a physical vessel. I think we're going to see that diversity in a particular Earth energy, and probably in the other one too. But it's all dependent on what's a control agenda, what's a service to self ideology versus these other planes of existence. So the minute a person sort of changes who they are on the inside can launch them into a different place. But the thing is, for the last 26,000 years, it hasn't been easy to get on any other timeline than the mishmash of timelines we've been in for so long. So we have to be like, not just assuming we'll be able to easily escape anything, and we have to just do the work now, because the same thing happened to on Orion and other places like Apex, and it's been the net and sort of the quarantine has been really difficult for most people to even know how to begin to penetrate, and this is our chance right now.
What do you think about the leaders of the world? Are there any good leaders, as it were, or are they all pretty much the same?
Well, I mean, even if they're not the same, if they don't have a full picture of what's going on, they're not going to be very effective. They might find themselves compromised once they're there. They might find themselves, totally defeated and, maybe supported, but, getting more information out to the people versus it being about becoming president. I think there's well-intentioned people everywhere, within every sector of all that we, know, except for the darkest of dark that has been completely taken over, by the darkest of entities. But I think there are well-intentioned leaders. I think they're mostly compromised. We're dealing with a much more powerful secret government, secret space program. And until somebody can step up there and open us all up, the human race up to the multifaceted layers of the system that we're dealing with and how it influences all of humanity, we don't have real leaders. We have people that have good hearts and are doing their best, but this is why we're creating the disclosure. We can't wait for them to do it. We have to, blast all this open and then let everything fall into place more appropriately than what it is now. I see that happening.
Mm. Yeah, I think most leaders are, how would I say, they're controlled by corporations mostly. The things like the president, he's put into that position from donations from large corporations, from the pharmaceutical companies, from oil companies, from all kinds of companies who have their own agenda for getting that particular person into power, and then using that power to, get new laws put in place, get new agendas put into position to make more money, pretty much, isn't it, really?
Yeah. And I mean, it's that vicious cycle. And when we think of all the black ops projects and all the things, the different rings, drug rings, porn, I mean, the list is endless of, how they play with that money behind the scenes and also scooping up all our tax dollars and everything like that. And, so as long as, we're in that, we're in agreement to some form of corruption until everything's exposed and cleaned. I mean, it needs to be cleaned. And right now it's still very much a mess. Yeah,
this goes into like the timeline that's being, created at the moment. Do you think that we're actually on a positive timeline at the moment?
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think we have been for a while. You have to really be in a trance to be vulnerable to the trap that has nothing to do with those people, being dark, like the groups and leaders behind this level of sort of control and enslavement and sort of new world order scenarios. It's just being in the trance, being in that unconscious life cycle with, very disturbing things that prolong and keep alive like the greatest like crimes and violations and abuses and injustices that we can imagine. That the very thing that you submit yourself to is the very thing creating it that acts like it's there to help it and solve it. And it's all wrapped up in those different, ET groups that have made sure that this is the life cycle of that, level of energy. And yeah, it's really powerful. And so, I'm hoping that what these shows do and what our work would do is influence some of those leaders to open their mind up to the rest of what's going on and not give up necessarily because they're enmeshed in the matrix stuff. There's got to be just a way to approach, during this time, at least make a few attempts and then like, okay, we're out of here. We tried.
Yeah, a lot of people say that we've been here before many, many times. We've been through this cycle before, and it's failed. Things like Atlantis and Egypt, and some even older than that. We've been here many times before. It's failed. Humanity has, some catastrophes happened, and we've had to start all over again. You could say, well, what's different this time? Why is it going to succeed this time?
That's an awesome question. I love it. Well, if we look at, every 26,000 years, we go through this full procession of the equinoxes, which has to do with the ebb and flow of, ages of humanity that are in a very high place, and when they turn into like back into sort of the dark ages. And anyway, who wants to be on that loop anyway, where it's like, oh, okay, we're going to have 1,000 years of good times, and then it's all going to plummet again. It's like, I don't want to be around for that. Thank you. And maybe to some degree, I don't know. I don't know if I would, but the point is at the end of every cycle, there's a really big opportunity to move like even beyond that, because there's other universes and other galaxies. And this last 26,000 year cycle, we were dealing with this, quarantine and, things put in our DNA so that we couldn't expand into these ascension energies. And we've basically been locked in here. The previous civilizations were a part of that. And they have roots in why this level of oppression has been taking place, because it goes, way further into history than, what that cycle represents. It actually was the beginning of the Earth grids being infected by, all these different rebellions because they didn't want genetic healing after they had been hybridized, because they had joined alliances with these controlled beings way too much because of, the hybridization and being convinced of this or that. And so, yeah.
So what's different this time that makes you think that something good will come of this? Then why do you think?
The cycle. When we look at the story and not so much the cycles, because the cycles will give us that idea that okay, things are going to repeat themselves, and we're just constantly like repeating ourselves here.
We're just along for the ride, kind of thing, isn't it? Really.
Right, but I think there's a point in which we break through that, and that has to do with the fact that there is a seed of an intention here as an ascension planet. And once it reaches fruition and it sort of blossoms and it becomes, its fullness, then one can move on to the next level. But it doesn't promise that everybody's going to reach that blossoming. I mean, we're being sprayed, we're being trampled upon. So we might have to go back into the ground again and repeat the cycle in order to really be able to utilize those cycles for our greatest development and growth. But if we were able to stay on board enough to be healthy enough to know that that exchange of energy is taking place on a cosmic and earthly level, I feel we can move, onto the next level and into a higher earth energy that doesn't keep playing out these different ages and cycles. Because in the higher earth energies, that is a little bit more stabilized. And so as we activate ourselves and move into that, we'll find ourselves not so much, even in the golden age aspect that falls again. We can be someplace completely different. And it's different now because, the different cycles before didn't complete themselves because we sank in density. When we're dealing with exploded planets, the cycles of nature and even the amount of planetary bodies that we're dealing with become different. So when we look at all these different cycles, they're also interrupted by all these different wars, that have created genocide or have wiped out certain codings that connect to root races that make it impossible for us to activate each other and actually take advantage of the fact that the doorway opened after that cycle was over. So the reason this one is different is because we have all these experiences that have culminated and all these different levels of developmental phases that we've gone through, from being advanced in our DNA and really in a whole nother level of advanced mastery, ascended mastery even, or just benevolent extraterrestrials or founder races or guardians ourselves, all of a sudden we're in this human density. And the reason it's different is because just like a person matures in their own life and looks back and learns from it, the cycles change because we're dealing with the same cycles. But look, we start as babies and we end up as adults. So in the larger cycles related to the 26,000 years in the precession of the equinoxes, we're picking up things at each stage that turns the cycles into something completely different. And that's the alchemy, because nature's a part of the alchemy. So when we complete like a certain part of it, it morphs into something else. And I think that's what, we're dealing with, and it's something that's inside of us. So it will be the same, though, for those that choose to repeat the pattern and need to stay on that timeline and to like repeat some of this. But those that are like, okay, I'm done with this, I'm not connected to any of those old archetypal energies or false teachings or whatever you might be hanging on to that keeps you in that cycle, you can move on from it or stay and help, but once you're outside of it, you might forget it, but you can never lose it. So again, it's a little bit, different for everybody, but
yeah, it's just it's hard to believe that we're on a positive timeline if you look at how messed up the earth is, with things like
timeline. Yeah, you're still
with things like Fukushima and all the stuff we're doing to the earth and GMOs and we're spraying this and that and chemtrails and the food we're eating is crap basically, and weapons, nuclear weapons and chemical weapons and all the, you could go on forever with how much destruction we're causing on the planet. It's hard to believe that anything positive could come out of it.
But the thing is, it's like squeezing us out of it like a splinter. It's basically because it's such an uncomfortable energy and we're not submitting ourselves to it or being allowing the toxicity to break us down, not allowing whatever nanoparticles or whatever artificial intelligence signals to penetrate our consciousness. By knowing the difference, we defy, all those sort of attacks. And, but we can respond to it in two different ways. We can either look at it as something that's helping us to set ourselves free so that we know that we don't want to attach ourselves to this level of manipulation, which means we've called our power back. Our minds can't be controlled. So therefore, we're not reflecting a system that is bent on that. And so that's not the same for everybody. Other people will get further and further into the trance, and they will experience the toxicity and the mind control and the transhumanism, which is basically like a life support system to a phantom dead Earth, that is imitated holographically, the original Earth that only has a positive timeline because it's all about the laws of nature and cosmic laws, which is anytime anything gets injured or out of balance, it naturally finds equilibrium and it naturally, heals itself. And part of the laws of nature is the ether, which is the fifth element, which creates a complete and total transformation into a completely new form. So if we don't like the way it's been, after this 26,000 years of being enough off our axis as a planet because of these catastrophes, and with this overlay of powerful dark technologies, we're able to bust through that. But again, we might find ourselves, trapped, but not indefinitely. You might just have to go through something again or call upon, some sort of guide to help you bust through. And we have to be empowered enough to know that there's nothing we can't do. Even if the collective looks like it's not getting anywhere, that's not a gauge to where you're at. And those things and experiences that have resonance to it will walk you right out of it. And those that can connect with you and hold that frequency with you will be right there with you. But, we're in a splitting process. We're still going to be exposed to it.
Right. But is there like, is it like a plan B if it all goes wrong? A lot of people think, oh, don't worry, the aliens will come and save us, if we all mess it up. I don't particularly believe that's that idea. But, I've heard about the fake alien invasion, that there'll come a point where humanity is almost at self-destruction point, and then an alien race will come and say, oh, we'll help you solve your problems, all your problems, we'll give you the technology to feed everyone, to house everyone, and all this. What do you think about if that does happen? Should you believe any of it?
Well, I mean, it's usually the ET races that set up that scenario of destruction on the planet are the ones that are coming in with the life-saving technologies, and that's a part of the larger plan in order to kind of look like the rescuers, just like our government stand there and talk about 9/11, like, they care about the families and this and that, and right behind the curtain.
The governments create all the problems and then they provide the solution.
Right.
Well.
It's the same thing with certain ET races, but, we're also going to make connection with, benevolent groups. And, we'll feel the advancement within ourselves when we see them, and we'll sort of know the difference versus feeling like we're getting more and more run down as a human race and we need something to save us. That would mean that we didn't utilize the initiation. We didn't stay on track with the resources available coming directly from spirit and within our own selves and the planetary body. Yes, you can always reverse that and turn that around, because that's nobody can ever completely take that away from anyone. Once your consciousness attaches to it, no matter what barrier is put in the way, it's more powerful. It might take a little longer because you're dealing with physical density that needs to be removed, that might have, locks and chains that take a little bit, but we can access all sorts of superhuman strength. And because the thing is, the higher in our spiritual abilities we get, the less matter has form, and the more flexible it becomes. So a person would have to find their own mastery in whatever choices they made, but and make up for whatever choices got them way off track. But those that have gotten themselves there, I think, are going to keep in connection. If you hold the intention, how can you possibly miss the boat, even if you're not getting it completely and totally? It's just simply making that connection and just stating it to yourself and knowing that's your truth. It doesn't matter how many times we fall on our face because we've been compromised. We're all trying to do our best here. But I think the minute you just hold hands with it, it's never going to let you go. Only we let it go and we choose something else. And that leads to digression, and then, believing in whoever shows up and says, I got the solution to heal you and the planet. And then all of a sudden, you're owned. And maybe some people want that because they don't know how to take full on responsibility. So we can't think it's all bad, but, we got to look at where the real violations are. And it's obvious that there's been nothing but violation because we didn't vote for any of this and we're kept in the dark. So it started off unfair. And those things need to be followed into certain timelines, even if we're not on those timelines, to help prevent them from, taking more away than it needs to. And so it's always that question of the call to action and the need to just take care of your own self. But I think right now we just have to keep bouncing back and forth and not deplete ourselves too much in the process.
Right. Timeline-wise, do you think we'll see any real change in our lifetime, or is it like the next generation that will actually see
next
like
couple
disclosure?
months.
Sorry, was that what? Go ahead, Laura.
Disclosure?
Like, do you think we will see like disclosure of technologies of free energy and that type of thing within our lifetime, or will it be down to the next generation who will get the benefits of that?
I think it's going to be in our lifetime, just because it's already out there. They're already using weapons that are being, people are calling out, these fires are coming from energy weapons, and, people have come out with, things about being targeted, and, we recognize the technologies that are really advanced that are already being used, and they've been used for a really, really long time. So I think what we're going to see is sort of a galactic war complete itself with all these different groups that have influence over us, some with our best interests more at heart than others, but and we're probably going to see the confusion of how all these different forces are coming together, sort of with us, caught in the middle in this tug of war game. And because we're going to see enough different sides of it, we'll be able to sort of have discernment about what we choose to align with, because it's all like we're surrounded by it on every level. And I think in our lifetime, depending on really the timeline we're on, because I do think that plays a huge part. It's already here, and in our lifetime, and within the next year or two, the lights are going to be even stronger on it, and we're the ones that are making sure of it. So I think it moves at the speed of what your creation is, coming from your own self, and it's obvious that you're going to see it in your lifetime on the timeline you're on. I can sense it. I mean, I can't prove that. And I think with most of us who are a part of all this, and you too, Sarah, I mean, I think we're going to see it because we're the ones that are making sure it gets seen. Whereas those that still can't wrap their head around it, might stay on a slower, level, or just be somewhat compartmentalized from it until they're ready, because it's really right under everybody's nose. So Yeah, I don't want to, have rambling answers, but
yeah, I don't know if Sarah wants to comment on that as well.
No, I do. I agree that there's, an awakening happening, and that, we're all going to see it in our lifetime. I've just noticed how simple things, at least here in the United States, there's a lot more places such as Whole Foods, organic food. People are really waking up that they need to eat better, to get more healthier. And I believe that, again, food is connected to spirituality. So now it's really growing here in the United States. As much as there's a lot of just negative things happening, it is. And 5-6 years ago, you didn't see this. If you talked about organic food, a lot of people would laugh, and you were kind of looked at as some weirdo. Now it's like becoming a trend everywhere, which is a good thing. And it's having a change on people's consciousness. It is helping to change the consciousness. So I do see people awakening, on different levels. I think it's happening. We can't just want one full awakening instantaneously, because we need everything good comes with patience. And us, again, we're public figures working at pushing towards awakening or towards the awakening. And at least for me, I can see that it's happening, but it's not happening instantaneously. It's happening in levels. It's happening almost like, in small ripples, but it is happening. I do see it happening.
Yeah, totally. And I noticed that too. I mean, in Walmart and all the conventional kind of grocery stores, and even in convenience stores, there's healthy snacks, there's healthy options. And that's a clear sign, that hasn't been shut down. That's not, and just all the supplements. I mean, you can heal yourself from pretty much anything if you do the research and you just order this or that. We have access to all of it, and that's huge. That's totally huge. And I completely agree. It is showing signs, but, we're holding the hand of the slowest hiker, not even the slowest though. So it feels slowed down for us, but, people, when they get in touch with our information, sometimes it blows their mind too much. So they're like, they kind of slow it down, but, it's okay. It is what it is.
Mm. We're going to finish in a couple of minutes. Is there like a message you want to give to people? Anything you want to say, Laura, just to close the show off?
Well, I just really encourage people to just feel, a lot of confidence about what's unfolding into the future, and just really be clear with the priority of your inner work and processing, and doing all that it takes to make room for the new energies coming in, and that you don't need to overwhelm yourself in how you're going to stay on track or free from danger. Just know it in your heart and do whatever it takes, for you to feel it on the inside. And it's a time of purging. So allow yourself to be uncomfortable. Say goodbye to all the relationships that take away from you, and begin to commit yourself to yourself and your truth, and allow for the difficult phases and processes that come along with what takes place before that gets fully rebirthed into your life. But trust that that's your destiny, and it's there for you. It's there for everybody.
Mm-hmm. And where can,
no matter how it feels.
Where can people find information on you? And what's your website? You want to give out your details if people want to contact you for any one-to-one work, if you're still doing that.
My website's down right now, so you can message me on Facebook. My website should be up this week, in this LauraEisenhower.com, and I can do session work and help you to just really step out of the negative patterning, create alchemy, step into the highest of yourself, and be part of this shift and be the activator. It's really good times to be alive, and it's much different than what it was not too long ago. So anyway, I thank you guys for having me on, and we'll definitely be in touch.
Okay, well, that's the end of the show, everyone, and please tune in next week for our last show, when we'll have Andrew Gow on our show for the last one. That's next Sunday. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Laura, and thank you, Sarah, and good night.
Listen to Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.